Welcome to the Argus Foundation Meet the Minds Zoom Candidate Forum for State House District 72. I'm Christine Robinson, Executive Director of the Argus Foundation. Meet the Minds are meetings, typically luncheons with guest speakers to talk about important issues impacting the community, state, and world. We hold typically luncheons 6 times per year. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we must do this by Zoom. This will be our 4th candidate forum for this political season, and it's not our last. I would like to welcome our candidates and express appreciation for their participation in this forum today. We have 4 candidates today who are all running for 1 seat. This state house seat is currently held by State Representative Margaret Good, who did not file to run for re-election. Instead, she is running for Congress, so it is an open seat. Present with us today are all of the candidates who will be running in both the primary and general elections. This is a partisan election. There are 3 candidates who are running in a primary that occurs on Tuesday, August 18th. Donna Barcomb, Fiona McFarland, and Jason Miller. The winner will face off against Buckman in the general election on Tuesday, November 3rd. The Florida Constitution spells out how our state is governed. We have a bicameral legislature. We have a state Senate and a state House of Representatives. This is for a seat in the State House of Representatives, District 72. Elections for state house seats occur every 2 years in even years. There are term limits, which limit the time a person can hold the seat to 8 consecutive years or 4 consecutive terms. We have 5 state house seats here in Sarasota County, and I'm going to show you what those look like. Here's Sarasota County and what those house seats look like. The House District 72 is in the orange or coral right here. And let's take a closer look at that. And here is a close-up version of it. It is bordered by University Avenue to the north, State Road 681 to the south. On the west is Siesta Key and the Barrier Islands, and to the east is I-75. It does contain portions of the city of Sarasota. With that out of the way, let me go over how this candidate forum will be conducted. This is a recorded forum that will be posted on our website, YouTube channel, and social media. This is the property of the Argus Foundation, and permission must be sought for the use of the video. The video should not be edited or altered from its original format. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute opening, which will be timed. We have a yellow warning card that will be shown when there's 26 seconds remaining, followed by a red card when time is up. After the openings, candidates will be asked some questions in which they will be given 90 seconds to answer. Again, they will get a 20-second warning. While it does make for great political theater to ask candidates questions on the spot without warning, in reality, all of us want our elected officials to study issues before voting and make thoughtful votes. We want to encourage that, and so to that end, we have provided the candidates a list of possible questions that we may be asking today. All of the candidates were provided this list ahead of time. We will be only asking questions from that list. After that, I will turn to some questions provided by Argus members that were given to the candidates yesterday, late morning, if we have time to get to them. Candidates will be given 90 seconds to respond to those questions as well. After questions, each candidate will get a 1-minute closing. The Argus Foundation and our members pride ourselves in our tradition of civility, our deep conversations about issues, and our respect for each other, our guests, and our speakers. We are not interested in what candidates think about their opponent or what their opponent has done. We are interested in hearing about what the candidates will do and understand more about each candidate. I want to thank each of the candidates for continuing on with that tradition today. So let's begin. Each of you will have a 2-minute opening for this forum, and the order for that is going to be Donna, Drake, Fiona, and Jason. So Donna, you have unmuted yourself. Thank you for that. And you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Christine. And I want to thank the members of Argus for being such great supporters, both in willing to do yard signs, being on my host committee, and also making donations to my campaign. I am running for state rep because I have deep roots in Sarasota. It's the place I love, the place I call home. I have lived all over the United States. I graduated from UCLA and then received my master's in Boston University, but I've never lived the 33 years that I've lived in Sarasota. I have raised my 4 sons in Sarasota, all graduating from Sarasota County Public Schools in the district. I own Professional Physical Therapy Center in the district. I have raised my sons, managed my business, and been a community advocate for Sarasota. I was Southside PTA president. I was Junior League of Sarasota Inc. president. I was elected to the Sarasota County Hospital Board for 3 terms, twice its chair. And I am currently sitting on the Sarasota County Charter Review, being chair of that once. I was raised a conservative, and I will take those conservative values to Tallahassee, looking at every issue through a conservative lens, rewarding free enterprise and protecting the American dream. I promise and pledge to take care of Sarasota and protect its unique character and values. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Drake, please your opening. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks to everybody in this race who's decided to run to represent District 72, and thank you to all the Argus Foundation members. I'm Drake Buckman. I've been a CEO of my own law firm along with my wife for almost 30 years. Like Donna, this is my home. This is where I've raised my family. This is where I too, along with my wife, we've raised our daughters and our son. They were all educated here in the local public schools. In the course of my career, I've represented literally thousands of business owners and individuals from virtually every neighborhood in District 72. I have I think, intrinsic understanding of what the issues are, of what people want here, and what needs to be protected. When I got into this race originally, it was because I wanted to preserve our environment and keep our schools just amazing and excellent. And I was worried about it. Now, after COVID, I want to be a voice for my neighbors and the other citizens in 72 to address the crisis. I don't have an ideology particularly, except that I am for 72. When I'm elected, if you're in the legislature and you want to do something right for this district, or you do something that will benefit the citizens and my neighbors, I will work with you. If you, however, are going to do something that might damage our beaches, our water, our schools, you can count on me as someone who is not going to be working with you. So my job and my role, as I see it, is to give back to the district that gave me a profession, that gave me a family, and that will give me a retirement. I owe the district that, and I will be a voice for my neighbors. And that's what I want the opportunity to do. I believe I have the leadership, and I have the ability and the energy to really be an advocate for my neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Drake. And next is Fiona.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I appreciate Argus's flexibility in having this forum online because even though the virus has changed how we campaign, it's not changed the importance of understanding who you're voting for. And whichever the 4 of us ultimately wins this election in November, that person will play a very important role in representing Sarasota as the state moves forward from this pandemic. I've met many of the Argus members, but for those who I haven't met before, I'm originally a New Yorker. I went to the Naval Academy for college and then served on active duty as an officer, sailing around the world on guided missile destroyers, and then in the Pentagon before getting an MBA, and then joining the business world and spending some time with management consulting firm McKinsey. I moved to Florida shortly after transitioning from active duty and into the reserves with my husband, Matt, who's originally from Southwest Florida. And I'm stationed still in my reserve capacity at MacDill Air Force Base. And what I found when I moved here is that, particularly in comparison to my home state of New York, is that Florida is remarkably well run. We have an attractive business environment, we have no income tax and a high degree of personal freedom, and we have incredible access to nature. And I believe that's because we are a case study, frankly, in what 20+ years of conservative state management and governance can bring. And I want to join that team because I take service to our country very seriously and service to our people very seriously. What I've learned during my time in the Navy and as a management consultant is something I think will serve me well in Tallahassee, and that's how to listen. Politicians shouldn't think they have all the answers, but they should know how to find them, which is by working with those who know best, folks like you who are leaders in the community and the people that they represent. So thank you, Christine, and thank you to the Argus community for having us, and also for demanding civility as we discuss these issues. I think that's how politics ought to be.
Thank you. Jason, you're up next.
Yes, thank you, Christine, and thank you to the Argus members. Many of you I've met, and if not, I'm meeting you for the first time, certainly virtually. My name is Jason Miller, and I'm running to basically to keep Florida moving forward. We've seen significant gains in the economy and the quality of life in the past several years. All of that's been basically upended, and we are we're facing some of the biggest challenges that the state's ever faced. And we as Americans and as Floridians are stronger than our problems, and I'm running because we can solve these problems together. Currently, I'm the head of litigation at a law firm here in Sarasota, the Nasby Thompson Law Firm in Sarasota and Bradenton. And I've been a lawyer, litigator for about almost 20 years. I've been a prosecutor, a patriot, and a parent in my background, and I want to tell you a little bit about that before I get into just some general things about what I think the legislature needs to do moving forward. Like I said, I was a prosecutor here in Sarasota, Manatee, and Venice, prosecuting the entire spectrum of criminal charges, working in court, litigating in court, doing trials day in and day out. In fact, with our host Christine Robinson years ago in Venice. And with many of the other individuals that are running for office all over Sarasota County as sheriff and as state attorney, worked hand in hand with them for about 8 years through all the rank and file that is associated with that office, all the way to the felony division. After I was a prosecutor for a number of years, I joined the military, and I worked as a JAG in the military, serving overseas and locally, and of course, a parent. I have 3 kids in this public school system here. My wife is a teacher in the school system. We've got a lot to talk about and a lot of work to do. We're facing an unknown but sure deep budget shortfall. So in closing, the voting has started. So I'm going to ask for your vote at the end of today. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our first question. Drake, you will answer first. It'll be Drake, Fiona, Jason, then Donna. Drake, what do you think is the single biggest issue facing the business community that state government can help with? Please be specific.
I've thought a lot about this question, and I am a business owner, and so I have to reduce it to what is my level. What is the biggest threat to my business as well as other businesses and all of my colleagues? It's COVID. That's all it is. The virus is stalking us. There's a killer, on the land, literally. It is affecting and attacking every level of Florida business, from tourism to professional businesses to travel. Agriculture is really being destroyed by it as well. Every single level of every business transaction is affected by COVID, and that's because, frankly, of fear. Because there isn't a comprehensive plan in place centrally to govern and understand the virus, to fight it systemically and attack it. So I think it is a farce to think that any kind of forward thinking can happen right now unless we deal with the COVID crisis. It affects every one of our customers, every one of our managers, every one of our salespeople. It affects our landlords because of problems perhaps making the rent, and it certainly affects our employees above all else. So until we deal in a comprehensive way from Tallahassee with the COVID crisis and make that the #1 priority, we will be exactly where we are now for the foreseeable future. We must act, and we must have a comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Fiona.
Yeah, I mean, guys, in short, the single biggest issue I hear from people in the business community is how to get back to work and how to do it safely. Employers are worried about liabilities, both in keeping their workers and their customers safe. Employees are wondering about how they can work from home or if they'll even have a job through the end of the year. And then industry leaders are thinking how they can reinvent the future of their work or their market. There's many different ways that state government can sort of plug in here, several different levers we can pull. And it frankly is part of what motivates me more than ever to be in the legislature moving forward. Now, I've had talks with several Argus members on various avenues for state involvement, but there's one particular one that I've been sort of thinking a lot about this week, and that's infrastructure, and more specifically broadband and roads. So on broadband, between online education, remote work, or even moving more of our business online and on online transactions, the state can really take some initiative on improving cell and broadband coverage across the state. I'd love to explore avenues for credit subsidies or equity investments that the state can make to incentivize some private provider expansion into underserved and rural regions. And then secondly, on infrastructure is roads. I think we can take advantage of some low interest rates and available labor to really focus on rebuilding and renewing our road system, which will help tremendously as interstate travel, I think, is the first one that'll pick up before air travel will. So those are some two that I have on my mind these days.
Thank you, Fiona. Jason, the question's to you.
Thank you. Yes, certainly the single biggest issue facing the state is COVID. In fact, I think it's the biggest three, and it's the ripple effect that COVID is having on the state. That was discussed well previously. That it's affecting unemployment, it's affecting business transactions, it's greatly affecting tourism and the agriculture industries, which are the main industries here in Florida. So we have to get out in front of the COVID epidemic. We have to be able to open certain businesses safely. And we have to be able to do that in a way that is promoting business and in a way that promotes the things that are actually profitable to the state government. One thing that I would like to add, in addition to the conversations that my opponents just discussed, is that we can also look and see what's coming. There's been, as a litigator in the court systems here in the 12th Judicial Circuit, there's been a shutdown in mortgage foreclosures. There's been a shutdown in evictions. Couple that with the large amount of unemployment that's been going on all summer and is likely to continue through the end of the year, there's going to be another wave of mortgage foreclosures and evictions and litigation that goes on. So I think it would be helpful to have a litigator in this seat who's familiar with those transactions, and now that we've experienced 2008, the effects, the large second and third order effects from all of those. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Donna, your question.
Donna, I think you might still be on mute.
Okay.
Hang on a second, Donna. Donna, go ahead and unmute yourself again.
There we go. Okay, so as a small business owner, I understand intimately the challenges that business owners are experiencing. We're trying to keep our businesses afloat. We're trying to keep our employees employed. We're trying to protect our employees and our customers, and we have increased costs trying to adhere to the CDC guidelines. I believe there is a fine line between oppression and protection. And I believe we have seen governments throughout the United States that have leaned toward the control side. And I believe that's not a pretty sight. What I believe is that the free market is going to lead Florida and this country out of this economic downturn. So as a legislator, we need to do everything we can to allow free enterprise to flourish, which is to keep taxes and resist raising taxes, keep taxes low. We need to decrease regulation, and we need to protect our civil liberties. Governor DeSantis has created the budget or eliminated some items in the budget for this year, but next year is going to be very austere. And we need someone who knows Sarasota and has been involved in Sarasota and has advocated for Sarasota up in Tallahassee to fight for Sarasota. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Next question. Gas taxes are declining in Florida, leaving less money for transportation projects. Do you support variable or dynamic toll pricing on state roads? What remedies do you propose for congestion? Fiona, you will have this first, then Jason, Donna, then Drake. Fiona, your question.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not totally sold on congestion tolling, and I worry that it feels an awful lot like a tax on mobility. I think we need to study it more and find out what impact it'll actually have. But the point is that the most efficient way to operate our freeways is to keep traffic moving. And so it sort of follows that congestion can be thought of as a waste of public investment on those highway systems. So I don't love the idea of a toll. And from an operations standpoint, it's quite difficult to look at the issues that some paths have had on toll by plate and even the transponders, and then talk about making that system more complex. But you know, perhaps there's a way to do it and to do it well, and I'm certainly open to studying it more. I think, you know, pointing out the gas tax decline is an important nuance here. And Fort Myers has had some success with this. They put a rush hour toll on their midpoint and Cape Coral Bridge, I believe, and they saw congestion shift pretty significantly into the non-toll hours. And I think that's it's actually something that low-income workers support as well, just because it helps sort of standardize your commute time. So I'm definitely open to exploring it. I think the approach that I would like is maybe carrots rather than sticks, so lifting the toll rather than adding additional ones. So let's stay away from additional taxes if we can, I think.
Thank you, Fiona. Jason, your question.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with you know, less taxes. You know, as Republicans, it's not that we don't mind government spending and government revenue. It's that we definitely don't want to waste it. So this question about gas tax touches on a lot of different issues that I think we're talking about today, specifically transportation, congestion, and infrastructure. And there's been, it seems like every legislative session, there's a bill for infrastructure that either gets stalled or is delayed, or for whatever reason doesn't ever get a vote. Just for a little bit of background, there have been a couple of other states that have tried precisely these measures. Alabama, Illinois, and Arkansas, they have all tried similar measures to work on a toll, or what they call a use of the street. So in other words, if you're using the roadways more than your neighbor, then you would have more of a tax to pay. That would be offset in some of these places by a lowered gasoline tax. So it's not like there would be more taxes there. You would just be taxing the individuals who actually use the thing that is then being degraded. So if we're able to focus in on that and see that we can actually lower tax revenue and apply it better where it needs to be applied, I would be in favor of that. But just simply raising taxes, raising gas taxes or other things, as we see other vehicles go electric and in other different ways, they're paying less and less taxes. So I would want to see it be more efficient.
Okay, Donna, your question.
Okay, so the State Transportation Trust Fund is a complicated formula, but the use of gas in cars contributes to about 35% of it, and tolls very small. So I do not support increasing or dynamic or variable tolls, because I feel it's a disingenuous way of taxing mostly middle-class people, individuals who are either going to and from work or to and from school. So I would not support that at all. And in regards to congestion, then I would support what President Galvano is, or State President Galvano, Senate President Galvano is trying to do, in which he is trying to build new roadway systems. And I believe that is the better answer for congestion than trying to tax the middle class workers.
Thank you. Drake, your question.
I think the question can't be answered in a vacuum. I think this is we're having more of an academic discussion about whether or not anyone's in favor of taxes or tolls. No one wants to pay tolls. No one wants to pay taxes. But again, we have a wildfire currently right now burning through every level, economic level and social level of our state. So if we don't have income tax, which I don't want and no one wants, and if we have to have our property taxes predominantly going to protect our schools, which are also going to have a large budget shortfall, there has to be an adult conversation about what is needed. In other words, if COVID caused such a dramatic erosion of our economic life to the extent that our infrastructure has no ability to be paid for, then maybe it's something we need to look into. It certainly could be addressed with some stopgap legislation where we have, for example, a sunsetting bill that is tied to the amount of COVID infection or the amount of progress that's made with COVID being dropped down. Certainly there shouldn't be any government waste. Certainly I'm all for efficiency, but to simply say, you know, as a political idea, I'm not in favor of taxes, I just don't think is an effective strategy. We've got to pay for infrastructure. We've got to have, you know, the ability to conduct business in an efficient way on the roads. And, you know, most of the roads, frankly, most of the tolls are user taxes in that sense. 50%, by the way, of most traffic is from tourism. So it's just something that I would want to investigate further and have some hard data before I made kind of a blanket statement about whether or not I would be in favor of it.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. What is your opinion on Visit Florida and its funding? Our tourism industry has been devastated by COVID-19. What should be done to help this industry? This will be answered by Jason, then Donna, then Drake, then Fiona. Jason, you're up first.
Thanks very much. Visit Florida kind of gets a bad rap right up until the COVID-19 hit, and we're trying to have a unified tourism message to go out about Florida. Instead, we're seeing a lot of these negative press articles about people, kids on the beaches being irresponsible. But the truth about tourism, as everybody knows generally, and I have some specifics that, you know, it's the state's largest industry, $86 billion annually, employing 1.5 million or so Floridians. It has a vital role in job creation. It's a vital role in our low income tax, our low tax burden, because people traveling here pay much of the taxes which we enjoy that goes into things like infrastructure and into things in the general coffers. And Visit Florida has a unifying role there. It's been cut back, and I can understand why it's being cut back because it seems to be a significant budget. In 2019, it was a 30% slash to its budget down to 26 million, which seems like a lot of money. But it does give Florida kind of a rollout of Florida's welcome mat, which is something that we desperately need right now, whether it's Visit Florida or something else, is that we need kind of a rolled out version of Florida. We've seen Disney has opened in a COVID atmosphere with particular restrictions. And, you know, I think everybody's seen that, you know, heard that song, Be Our Guest, Be Our Guest. Well, we need that unifying voice to encourage people to come to Florida safely under those same guidelines.
Thank you. Donna, your question.
Yes, I fully support Visit Florida, and I know that it did have some reputational damage done a number of years ago without the appropriate oversight. But I believe that all of that has been corrected, and I just believe that we need to continue that oversight. Obviously, as Jason indicated, tourism is our major driver of sales tax revenues, in addition to agriculture and construction. So we need to do everything we can to market tourism for Florida. The challenge is, as everyone has said in previous answers, is the safety of the individuals and our tourists and Floridians. And until we get this virus, the control of this virus under control, it's going to be a challenge. You know, as I was on the institutional review board at Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and that's a board in which we do clinical studies. And as you've read in the newspaper, Sarasota Memorial has been been integrally involved in the research of COVID, both COVID plasma treatments, remdesivir, and now this new treatment regimen, Regeneron. And this is critically important to get under control the treatment and the management, and hopefully the elimination of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Drake, your question.
I think that the best advertisement for Florida has always been Florida. You can see as many ads as you want if you're living in Wisconsin or Ohio, but the bottom line is if you walk around in this state, particularly in this district, on Siesta Key or Mayaca and the wild places in this state, people come here and they stay. If they don't stay, then they dream about it when they go back home. The biggest commercial, though, we really need right now, to echo what Jason was saying, is we need consistent strategies to keep our COVID rates going down and depress this curve. This is something we can do. I would much rather be known, instead of having a large ad campaign with 30 or 40 or $50 million at this point, I would like to be, in the state in the Southeast that has almost no COVID. No one is going to come to Disney World and if it gets their kids sick. Nobody is going to Miami Beach if it's on fire right now with a 20% infection rate. The bottom line is a large group of people who should be here spending their money aren't coming here because they don't trust the data and the health rates that we have right now. Any money for that should be developed. Any money for advertising, in other words, must be used for, again, a comprehensive plan, which we don't have yet, to suppress this disease. It's certainly something we can do. And I do agree with Jason and Donna as far as that's concerned.
Thank you, Drake. Fiona, your question.
I'm ready. I think it's just very interesting that every candidate panel or forum that I've been on, the question of Visit Florida has come up. And I mean, poor Visit Florida, it's become so popular to hate them. But, boy, are we in a different economy than we were at the peak of the market during the legislative session. My time as a management consultant taught me to be a little suspicious of marketing spend. There is a way to track the impact of marketing dollars that's judicious and responsible. It's delicate, but it is possible. And so I think what I'll just say on Visit Florida is that I'd want to see accountability over its budget allocation. But those of you in tourism-related industries are probably looking at Virginia Haley at Visit Sarasota and hoping you can draft off her ad spend. But I maybe think the best thing we can do for our tourism-related industry and workers is to improve the business environment and offer some help there, rather than giving Pitbull $1 million to make a sexy beaches video.
Thank you, Fiona. So our order is going to reverse now. Jason, you'll take this question first. Jason, Fiona, Drake, then Donna. Jason, what is your opinion on school choice and tax credit scholarships or vouchers? What specifically do you believe can be done to improve education in Florida?
The answer to this question is a little close to my heart. You can see some pictures in the background of my kids that are students in the Sarasota school systems, and my wife, who's a teacher locally in the school system as well, who are a firsthand resource in kind of educating me on these particular issues as they relate to District 72. And generally speaking, I mean, Sarasota has really been kind of a beacon or a shining star for charter schools and for school choice and credit scholarships. So those particular systems work on the individual level or county by county level, depending on what the specialty school is. There's a science academy here in Sarasota. There's an arts academy at Booker. There's particular specialty, and of course, Pineview is for School for the Gifted. So there are particulars about the schools here that make school choice, credit scholarships, and particular kinds of vouchers really kind of accessible and friendly. So I would be in favor of the concepts generally. In other jurisdictions and in other places, you can see how it actually hurts students. It actually hurts the students that are either left behind or maybe they go elsewhere. So it would come down to an individual choice. I think parents generally should be primal in that choice. They have the choice of educating their kids. in conjunction with the teacher's leadership and the leadership of the school system, I'd be generally in favor of those concepts. But really briefly, how do you improve the system? Hire and retain the best teachers you can get.
Thank you. Fiona, your question.
I support school choice and I support tax credit scholarships. I also applaud the governor for raising the starting salary of public school teachers and preserving that in the budget. Because one thing I think we all agree on is the outsized and important role that teacher quality has in educational impact. So I applaud that we're elevating that profession. You know, one idea that I've been thinking about lately, you know, particularly as our schools are talking about opening in August, is around transportation. What minimal data we do have on the virus in school settings suggests that the highest risk population, and I'm going to take the children out of this and focus on the adults for just a second, but the highest risk population for adults involved in the school system are in bus drivers. Now, getting children to schools that are far away from their homes, even if this is the best school for that child, the transportation part of this isn't a new problem, but I think what we see is that the virus has sort of enlarged and complicated this transportation situation. And I'd be really curious if there are ways that the state could lean in there and be helpful.
Thank you. Drake, your question.
Try that again. The school systems are simply, in District 72, are the best in the state. That's just the way it is. People come here, the very first question they ask young professionals, people of school who already have school-age children, what are the schools like? And what they find out in Sarasota is the public schools particularly, this is the place you want your children to be educated, period. And it's such a value add to move here, live here, set up a business and know that your children, like mine, got incredibly diverse, wonderful, world-class educations in public schools. This is really an example in our district, in District 72, of no matter what your skill level is, poor or wealthy, there is a path for you in Sarasota County schools. I'm a huge believer in public education. There are times, admittedly, where public education may not be a right fit necessarily, and that if you have a nonprofit charter school that a group of well-meaning parents get together and who have children of like abilities, there is a role for charter schools. My problem is, and I think the reason why so much of it is outrageous is there is a group of legislators in Tallahassee who are making money off of for-profit charter school companies. And what we worry about as parents, and what we've been worrying about the last little while is we don't want those for-profit companies to get their hands on our $900 million Florida educational budget. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not against them in principle. It's more of a specific idea, but for-profit management companies have absolutely no place in public education.
Thank you, Drake. Donna, your question.
Thank you, Christine. I believe there is no greater gift that one generation can give the next than a good education. As a PTA president, as the Education Task Force chair for all the junior leagues in the state of Florida up in Tallahassee, as a consumer for four children going through the public school systems, I believe that injecting competition into any institution only makes that institution better. I believe that no matter who you are, what you are, that the parent is the best person to decide what environment the student, his child or her child will do best in. So I am a total supporter of educational choice, both public and private school vouchers. I would continue to support the funding of the Parental Empowerment Scholarship Fund, which is funded through corporate incentives. I also will recognize and both Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran and Governor DeSantis in initiating the best benchmarks for excellent student thinking. I think we need to decrease the achievement gaps. We need to increase vocational learning in our schools, and we also need to increase our high school graduation rates. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next question is going to be on water quality. What plan do you have to improve water quality in Florida? Please be specific, and we'll start with Fiona, then Drake, then Donna, then Jason. So Fiona, you're up first.
You know, Senator Gruder's had a bill signed by the governor just the other week that increases fines on sewage spills by 50%, which by the way was signed by the governor while Longboat Key was actively dumping 25 million gallons of sewage into Sarasota Bay. And now I would have voted to support Joe's bill. But where I think I would like to see it go further, and this is something that John Thaxton has helped shape my thinking on, is that in addition to the stick or the punishment threat of fines, I think there should be a carrot, so to speak, where municipalities can either redirect those fines into capital improvements, you know, in piping or wastewater treatment plants, and you know, particularly if it's a business responsible for a willful or negligent spill, I think it would be interesting if the funds would direct into a state trust fund that then cities and counties can tap into for these capital improvement projects. In addition to sewage, you know, there's remaining work to do around stormwater infrastructure and surface water runoff into the water table. In the interest of time, and you know, also because I haven't totally solidified my thinking there yet, I'll skip over that. But I do want to point it out because it is an important contributor to water quality. You know, as I mentioned in my intro, I've never suggested that I have all the answers, just that I'll work hard to get them.
Okay, Drake, your question.
So water quality is something that was so incredibly important to me. It actually, when red tide came in, that was the main reason that I decided I needed to run, because obviously red tide is something that the organism that causes it is a naturally occurring organism. We as polluters and as the people of the state, we have provided a ton of accelerants for it. And make no doubt about it, if we have bad water quality in Florida, we have no economy. It cannot exist. We have an extremely fragile ecosystem here, and in 72 particularly, the most important thing we can do is to make sure that there's adequate state funding for the Philippi Creek watershed. Philippi Creek is the main drain for District 72. About 70% of all of our neighbors live within about 3 miles of Philippi Creek, but if you notice, you still can't swim in it. It's been closed by the Department of Health because of high levels of E. coli bacteria. So I think we begin by making sure that our efforts with Philippi Creek is strengthened. The second thing is I agree that polluters need to be sanctioned and sued. It's ridiculous to think. I mean, since I announced my campaign in September, which has been not too long ago, there's been over 2 million gallons of raw sewage dumped into our district, and no one's paid a price for anything. So I think we need to keep continuing to support the local government here to get sewers involved, to get adequate plumbing in place, and we need to punish polluters. And I think that there's nothing more important to our district, to our beaches, and to our community than that.
Thank you, Drake. Donna, your question.
All right, thank you, Christine. So many of you know, who know the Barcombs, know that we are avid water people. We love boating, we love fishing, we love scuba diving, and we all care very much living in Sarasota about our waterways and our water. I support completely Governor DeSantis and the legislators' approach, and it's a 4-year project of $2.5 billion to correct the infrastructure and around Lake Okeechobee. I also support the continued funding of the research that's being done on the mitigation of both red tide and blue-green algae. I fully support the continued investment of science-based solutions to create more sustainable water. I support Forever Florida and its purchase of pristine and environmentally sensitive lands. those wetlands act as a natural filtration system. And I also support best practice management, especially in agriculture, for its conservation of water use. And so I applaud also the legislators and Governor DeSantis for passing the Clean Waterways Act just this past session. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Jason?
Thank you, everybody. And water quality is the lifeblood of Florida. Agriculture depends upon it. Tourism, beaches, and golf courses, they all depend upon it. It's easy to take for granted because you think it rains every day and water's just going to be there forever. But it only really takes one of the terrible, terrible red tide blooms, then it can have impact on tourism to see that this isn't a problem that's kind of going away. And all of the solutions, to borrow a phrase from my competitor from before, all the solutions really kind of stink. There, you know, when you're dealing with pollution, you're dealing with runoff, you're dealing with attempts at trying to motivate people to repair their antiquated plumbing systems because the septic tank system is, in need of a little repair. And that's the things that we all are. It hurts us all because things like Philippi Creek are not able to be used in the way that they really should be used. So I'm in favor, particularly to echo my competitors' sentiments, to enforce the laws that we have. I applaud the new law associating some fines and penalties associated with that. That tends to, like any other law, put some attention on the particulars of sewage leaks so that there may be few of them, and disincentivizes people from actually having those leaks. And hopefully, we can gain much more information regarding red tide and algal blooms in the future, that we can actually pass legislation to address that issue as well.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Next question. Law enforcement reform, criminal justice reform, and jail reform are hot topics across the country. What specifically would you change if elected, and why? Drake, you have this question first, then Donna, Jason, and Fiona.
I think we need a lot more training. The police, it's very important that the police understand what their role is in society. I think quite often they're mistrained, or they're not trained enough, in my experience. I had several years in a civil rights practice where I did a lot of depositions with a lot of police officers, and it was clear that they were not getting the kind of managerial support they need to understand what the law was and what their roles and obligations were. I also think we need to stop making the police departments EMTs, stop making them respond to mental health issues. The laws are written where we are placing a lot of law enforcement officers in situations that they don't have the training to do, and they really aren't law enforcement issues. Of course, we have to have a robustly funded police department. I think we have, generally here, a very good police department and sheriff's department by and large. But I can tell you, as far as law enforcement goes, the run of the mill, we need to pay law enforcement officers more to retain and attract the people that understand exactly what they're really there for. Is they are there to enforce the law, but they're also there to protect the rights of the citizens in a certain context. No one in 72 should be afraid of the police. They should not be afraid to call the police and utilize them. As far as, I'll just try to make it brief, as far as criminal justice reform in general, jails need to be not only punishers, areas where you punish, but also where you can get rehabilitation, where society can be re-entered. It should not scar you and render you unemployable, for example, to be convicted of a crime. We want to do everything we can to try to get our offenders back into society and as productive members.
Thank you, Drake. Donna, your question.
Thank you, Christine. I want to go on record. I do not want to, and I emphatically do not support the defunding of the police department. And maybe there's some opportunities for training, but I don't think defunding the police is at all an answer. As implemented by Sheriff Tom Knight, I think one of the things that we could do on a state level is actually replicating the intelligence to action program that we have in Sarasota County. And what that is actually they've broken down the jail system into pods. So those people who have issues with addiction, mental health, they actually and they use volunteers. So there's no increase in cost to the community. Education, even getting a driver's license, and actually having job fairs that allow these individuals to actually have a job when they leave, has shown that it's decreased recidivism rate. In fact, from what I've been told, that out of the 190 plus people that have gone through the program, only one person has been rearrested. So I think that's a great program just to replicate throughout the state of Florida. The other thing that I think is very important, and we do here in Sarasota, is that we target those repeat offenders and we get those repeat offenders off our streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Jason, your question.
Yes, certainly, and I echo the sentiments from before. I don't think there's anybody on the panel that wants to defund the police. I was a prosecutor for years. I've seen firsthand the value of really good police officers, really good police work, unbelievable investigative techniques, and just some incredible work that's done on the side of the law that would have made my job a little bit easier. In fact, a lot easier in some cases because of their upfront work that went into policing. Of course, with any broad organization, there especially when you spread that all over the country, there are reforms or tweaks or changes that need to be made to various particulars about that. And I echo some of the training discussion about that Mr. Buckman talked about. And in terms of specific criminal justice reform that I had prior to COVID was a bit of a pillar of my campaign, was that as a prosecutor and seeing repeat offenders, people in and out for particularized mental health issues or drug issues or things that were nonviolent issues, I really started to see that problem more as a human resource issue. How do you get people that are disenfranchised from the American dream to really plug back in and to want to plug back in? So Ms. Barcomb is correct that there are some mental health courts that have had a lot of success around the state, including here in the 12th Judicial Circuit. There are job fairs that have had a lot of success. I would want to favor those over just repeatedly putting people in expensive prison systems.
Thank you, Jason. Fiona, your question.
I'll focus my answer to this question around criminal justice reform today, because I've been talking quite a bit with Public Defender Larry Eager, who's serving on our state's task force, special task force for criminal justice reform. So I'd like to see changes in mandatory minimum sentencing for low-level and non-violent offenders, to give judges a little more discretion in sentencing, a sentencing that fits the crime. In addition, for the arguments in support of compassionate sentencing, or to perhaps combat discrimination in arrests, I think that mandatory minimum sentencing reform, and studies will support this as well, will go a long way towards reducing our jail or prison population, and therefore costs, without having a harmful effect on public safety, which is the paramount thing here. Now, additionally, something that Larry and I have talked about is I'd support legislation that allows people convicted of crimes at a young age to apply for a sentence review, which is something that appeals to me both as a volunteer on teen court and then also as someone who served as a collateral duty legal officer on board both of my ships in the Navy, and carried out captain's mass and Uniform Code of Military Justice punishments. Young people make mistakes, and I think there should be a channel for them, or an avenue for them, to have their sentences reviewed. Christine, the cards sometimes feel like you're grading us.
Thank you, Fiona. I actually feel like a soccer referee with these cards, actually. Moving on to the next question. What is your opinion on local government prohibitions on vacation rentals, and would you vote to limit local government's ability to regulate them? Why or why not? Donna, you have this question first, then Jason, Fiona, then Drake.
Well, I appreciate this is a contentious issue, and short-term rentals is a huge disruptor in the industry. like Uber and taxis were, and still are actually. First, I think that there should be no restrictions on long-term rentals. And that was a question in another panel forum. However, I do have to say that in February, I made a comment and I leaned with Governor DeSantis, and that I do, and as Charter Review Board member, I do lean to home rule in this particular situation. I believe that local governments are able to determine best what kind of restrictions they have on short-term rentals. I don't believe that the city of Miami, Sarasota, and Clewiston, for example, may all have the same needs in regards to short-term rentals. So I don't think there should be any kind of statewide mandate restricting the restrictions, double negative, on short-term rentals. So I support local control of short-term rentals.
Okay, thank you. Jason, your question.
Very similar regarding short-term rentals. It is a disrupting industry, and you can see the characteristic changes of some of the smaller towns within Florida. You can see it on Anna Maria Island. You can see it on parts of Siesta Key. You can see how they're changing, and that does have an effect on the charm that's within some of those smaller communities. So to the extent that those smaller communities want to protect that charm and thereby increase toward the tourist base and increase other avenues that actually increase revenue, I'd be in favor of it. And so therein, I echo the home rule statement by Ms. Barcomb about your local individuals and your local individual municipalities having that power to pass, understand and pass a rule specific to that legislation. There are current laws out there that indicate that a developer who takes a large risk by investing in and then going to develop a parcel of property, that they would have avenues if in the middle of that development, things change. The county commission changes its tune on a regulation. A city commission does the same thing. So there are legal avenues that can address specifically those existing uses if it's an inordinate burden on the development, and to maintain the desire for investment in real estate development to continue in Florida, because that's where a lot of the attraction to people moving here, buying here, and they're paying property taxes here occurs. So I'm for home. Yeah. So that's what I would favor, is a mix between the both of them.
Thank you, Jason. Fiona, it's your question.
The short-term rentals has always been a contentious issue, and I think it's actually going to get worse in this post-COVID world where people want to start traveling again, but maybe only with their own little fellow isolation circle and avoid bars and restaurants and hotels even. The short-term rental debate, it touches on two very fundamental issues for me. Personal property rights, which I support, and home rule, which I typically also support, and they're in contention here. Although I agree that government closest to the people is often knows best, it's also true that government can react emotionally to problems, pass emotional legislation or emotional policy, which is what I think is sort of what's driving at cities passing restrictions on what people can and can't do with their personal property, in the face of some real parking and trash and noise and other complaints that typically come in these neighborhoods with high conversions to short-term rental properties. So from a principle standpoint, I'm against local governments regulating rentals because of the personal property issue. I'd really prefer they solve the problem through some of the other levers like parking or noise complaints.
Thank you. Drake, it's your question.
I also just really believe in the fundamental right of people to have, dispose, and rent of their own property. There's really two groups here where these complaints come from. One is homeowners associations, where we have a homeowner association that's kind of suddenly overtaken by rentals where the neighbors don't know them. Maybe there's big parties going on and then everyone leaves and they're stuck with a bad situation. I would like to have more legislation to enforce homeowners associations' rights in those situations to either fine people who are doing this kind of thing, or just agree as a homeowner association, we're not going to allow rentals, short-term rentals in our neighborhood. So if you take, that's a lot of the people in 72. But the other, I have a problem with a non-homeowner association house where it's built, and suddenly the whole local government could be persuaded by developers or persuaded by large owners of apartments or hotels that for some reason I shouldn't be able to use my my property freely and responsibly. There are certainly, in that case, if I don't do it freely or responsibly, there are very simple legal avenues called nuisance suits in which the county government or the city government can bring these suits to fine homeowners to be responsible. So I have a big issue. I am not in favor of complete authority being given to local governments to determine what personal property issues are. I think you have a right to do with what you want with your own home.
Okay, thank you, Drake. So next we're going to move on to an insurance question. And it's a broad question. All types of insurances are increasing in the state of Florida, almost across the board, from health insurance to property insurance. What do you think can be done to lower these costs, and what laws do you think need to be passed to accomplish this goal? You can pick one type of insurance to address, or many in this. Donna, you have the question first, then Drake, then Fiona, then Jason.
Okay. Well, I think frequently insurance companies are vilified. Most of us in the audience and myself are all business owners, and we understand that you have to make a margin to exist, to pay your rent and to employ your employees. So obviously, if the payouts from insurance companies are larger than the premiums, that creates a problem. So the more payouts, the more our premiums go up. I think there's two things that we can do. One of which is that the government can stop some of the mandates on these insurance companies and make it a little less expensive for them to function. And secondly, to adjust some litigious and tort reform to make it also less expensive and less large payouts. The big issue is going to be in the near future, and I believe and I support the liability waivers to protect businesses. I've been speaking to manufacturing companies and other companies, and they're very concerned about being under litigation for people getting or employees getting COVID in their facilities. So I think that's another whole issue that we're going to have to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. So next is Drake.
Okay, so briefly on me, I pay thousands and thousands of dollars a year in insurance premiums for my business, liability insurance, health insurance premiums, a wide variety. That said, not large, but a significant part of my practice is frankly making Florida insurance companies do what they are supposed to do for their policyholders. So I'm very uncomfortable, I will tell you, with a business that is designed on risk. In other words, you give me a premium and I will pay out maybe if the facts are correct. I'm very uncomfortable with the state providing a tremendous amount of breaks. I think historically, if you look at the data, we don't get the benefit of the premiums. As far as tort reform is concerned, do I make my living doing suing, representing people in courts? Yes, but the fact is that tort reform sounds great until you're the one that's injured, until someone does something to you in a business deal, until you need access to the courts. So I think our tort system is fine as it is, our court system. We need to be able to get justice for our business owners and other people. I am not in favor, by the way, of any kind of liability for an act of God like this pandemic against business owners. I would be in favor of immunity in regards to that. But I will say that insurance, I'll use my last 30 seconds. Health insurance is the most important thing we face as business owners today. Health insurance. The premiums are too expensive, the system doesn't work, and we need some kind of basis that all Floridians, our employees, our customers, and everyone can get some kind of basic comprehensive insurance. So I think competition in the insurance industry is going to be the key.
Thank you, Drake. Fiona, your question.
I've talked to several Argus members about this issue as well, because this workers' comp thing is very top of mind for many Argus members who are employers, right? But I think the avenue that I'll come at this from today is is commercial property insurance. You know, the home insurance market is quite regulated and controlled. But one specific change that I'd be curious to explore more, and I'm even wondering if this is perhaps, I hate to say this, but perhaps a quick win, would be for the ability of the business community to apply the same sort of mitigation discounts as we have on residential property to commercial property. So for example, if you all are homeowners out there, if you've applied for a wind mitigation discount on your home insurance, you might be surprised to learn that a commercial property can't invest in those same weather hardening improvements or whatever and then qualify for the same property tax discount. So I think that's something that I would be very open to exploring. I think the textbook answer to this question about insurance costs is tort reform and to go after assignment of benefits and fee multipliers. And I talked to Congressman Stubbe the other day, and he said, Fiona, we've been fighting that fight. Or that fight has been fought for 10 years. He's, obviously a lawyer, so he's on one side of that argument. So I do want to point out that I'm aware that the assignment of benefits and the fee multipliers are sort of a target-rich environment there. But there's some other levers that we could pull here.
Thank you. Jason, your question.
Yes, thank you. And my answer is going to essentially target fraud, waste, and abuse. I think that's everybody. Everybody as a concept is against fraud, waste, and abuse. No one more so than an insurance company. Insurance companies, I imagine, don't want to honor their particular honest and well pled claims. However, they're just how do you know? How is it not ripe with fraud, waste, and abuse? A perfect example is, of insurance has gone up. Property insurance has gone up 25% since 2007 because of hurricanes. Specifically with the assignment of benefits reform bill that was passed that separates a person's ability to assign benefits for construction damage. You saw 75% increase in claim misconduct suits. There were about 1,300 suits of this kind in 2000. In 2013, there were 27,000 fraud, waste, and abuse suits in Florida. In 2018, there were almost 80,000 fraud, waste, and abuse suits of contractors or homeowners either colluding or for some reason trying to ramp up their claim for these things. So there's got to be some pushback there because that's generalized inefficiency. And if we can reduce fraud, waste, and abuse, it's just maybe it's my miserly hate of waste. I hate to see that. I'd like to see people who are legitimately injured, business owners who are legitimately injured, get a check and get it right away. I hate to see any pause in that because there's a suspicion of fraud, waste, or abuse.
Thank you, Jason. So we're going to move on to Argus member questions. So the first question I thought was an interesting one. Several coastal communities who receive state money for beach renourishment and water quality projects are restricting parking to visitors and those who live inland in order to limit the population in their communities. This is outside of the COVID-19 epidemic. Would you do anything to end this practice? Why or why not? And the order for this will be Drake, Fiona, Jason, and Donna. So Drake, you have that question first.
As a threshold issue, I would like to say that I think that beaches are the great democratic leveler in the state of Florida. It's really our Grand Canyon is the beaches in the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic. And I am a firm believer that all taxpayers should have full access to the beaches. What I am going to say, though, is this is, again, a lack of leadership that we have at the state level and a lack of a real comprehensive plan. And a lot of local beach communities are left to kind of try to figure this out. And what it looks like when you close down a publicly paid for parking area and you only allow beach people who own beachfront property to go on it, I think it's undemocratic and I think it's un-Floridian. But what has to happen, I would assume, we're not getting this direction from the governor's office, but what should be happening is kind of a social distancing, like a medium way. I would be in favor of, say, for example, with Siesta Key, if every other or every second or third parking lot was available and that we had relatively, strict compliance with that. I know during July 4th, oftentimes the sheriff's department will be stationed out there to close the lot if it gets too full. I think we need to have those basic common sense practices as well. And that would be my answer. I'm not in favor of completely closing public beach access that are paid for by tax dollars in that regard. But again, we need some leadership to get that done.
Okay. Thank you. Fiona, your question.
I'll keep it short because we're going on an hour now, I think. But Florida beaches are sovereign to the people of Florida, and they should either be open to all or closed to all. But we cannot have a patchwork system that excludes Floridians from accessing beaches and makes it so, as Drake said, you can only go to the beach if you own a beachfront property. And this is, I say this particularly because in-state tourism is likely to be the first type of tourism that returns to the market. So there's a business reason for this, but there's also sort of a constitutional reason for my answer here.
Jason.
I essentially would echo what my colleagues have said. That this is, tourism, as I said before, is the largest industry in Florida. They come because the beaches are beautiful. They come because they want to go home and tell people that they had a great time at the beach. I would hate to have a story where someone drives all the way down from Ohio, Pennsylvania, or Tennessee, and they come down and they can't even access the beach, and they've been shut away. Now that story goes back with the tourists back to their home, and that just destroys the joy that everyone really should feel in coming to Florida, seeing the beach, having a good time. So there has to be some middle ground where people can still access that beach. I mean, we all win if people think highly of Florida, want to travel and visit here, want to live here and move here. So we have to make that process of enjoyment and roll out the red carpet, essentially, so that they can be our guests. And we have to start that from day one when they're here. So I would be very skeptical about any of those regulations that limit entirely people's access to beaches in that way, and allow the tourism machine to continue.
Donna, your question.
Okay, thank you. Well, based on the criteria of the question, I would not support any restriction of other than residents parking in a parking lot that was paid for by the government and taxes of the people.
Okay. Thank you all. So we're going to move on to our closings now. You'll each have a minute for closings. We're going to reverse from how we started in the opening. So Jason, you'll go first, then Fiona, then Drake, then Donna. So Jason, you have a 1 minute for closing.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for your time. I truly appreciate it. We're here today to make a choice, or at least inform a choice. We're all looking to choose a representative.
Jason, I think your audio might be, your microphone may be switched over. It's a little hard to hear you.
Switched over. Let me start over then.
That's better.
Yeah, we're gonna have you start over.
We're all looking to choose a rep. We're here to hire somebody for a job. We're here to assign a set of tasks to an individual to then go to Tallahassee and to equipped to accomplish some common goals. And in Tallahassee, essentially, we need someone to win for us, not just for your particular party, but for all of District 72. We're facing some of the biggest challenges and crises that this state, or really any state, has ever faced. COVID-19, unemployment, a teetering economy, very importantly, very, very stiff budget cuts that we've already seen, some very particularized stiff budget cuts. District 72 has been a target, I think in part because there's a Democrat in the seat, a target for their own jobs programs. Moat Marine has been a target. New College has been a target. Cut, cut, cut. They've wanted to cut District 72 because we're not in the group in Tallahassee. What we need certainly is I think a Republican to go to Tallahassee, and a Republican that can win in November. So in a very contentious race that it's going to be moving forward, I'd like to ask for your vote, not just from the people that are Republicans, but for everybody come November. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Next up is Fiona.
Thanks to everyone who's still listening to this recording, and to the Argus board and Christine for having us on, and to Donna and Jason and Drake for, I think, a very good discussion here today, and I've enjoyed it. I'd love the opportunity to share a little bit more about myself and what I believe and sort of where my head's at right now. And I hope some of the things I've said have resonated. And if they have, I hope you'll support my campaign and vote for me. If you live in District 72, and if not, I do hope you'll reach out and help inform my thinking if I've missed something or if I've gotten something wrong. Because there's one thing I want to be clear about, is that politicians should never suppose they have all the answers. And my door will always be open, and I'll always listen, and I'll always be willing to work hard to get to the right answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Drake, you're closing. 1 minute.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Donna, and Jason and Fiona, too. It has been a really good discussion, and thanks again to Argus. I would just say that that you should elect me to be your representative, because I will fight for you, and I will fight for your businesses, your employees. There are 19,000 people currently in District 72 that are on first-time unemployment benefits. We are definitely in a crisis situation. This is not going to be a legislative session where it's business as usual, where lobbyists come in and special interests, are at a buffet. We have got to do everything we can to destroy COVID and come up with a legislative task force and a solution that we're not getting anywhere else on behalf of 72. So I will do everything I can. I hear you. I know I've talked to the people that are unemployed. I understand the value of these schools. I understand the value of our water quality. But most of all, I understand what it's going to take to get our businesses back online. And so I will be that advocate for you. I will be your champion and your voice in 72.
Thank you, Drake. And Donna.
Okay, well, now more than ever, we need a seasoned and experienced voice in Tallahassee, a conservative voice that will fight for Sarasota, someone who lives in Sarasota, who has owned a business in Sarasota, has raised her family in Sarasota, who has been a strong advocate for Sarasota. I pledge to protect Sarasota's unique character and values. District 72 has been sort of a revolving door with two different representatives in the last 4 years. And what I had learned being on the Sarasota Memorial Hospital Board is you earn a voice the longer that you're in a position. I have the commitment and the staying power to be your voice in Tallahassee. Please go on donnabarcomb.com if you want to know a little bit more about me and to support my campaign. And please vote for Donna Barcomb on August 18th in the primary. Thank you.
I want to thank each of our candidates for their attendance here today and for their willingness to serve, especially now. It is unsure times. We hope that everyone enjoyed this candidate forum. Please stay tuned to our YouTube channel and our website, and also please check out our columns in Sarasota Herald Tribune and SRQ Daily. And thank you, and be well.
Thank you, Christine.